Welcome to Saga Thing. We're putting the sagas of the Icelanders on trial. Welcome back to the second episode of Gisli Saga. I'm John.
And I'm Andy. This is the episode where we're going to go through our judgment section.
Absolutely.
And it's been a little while, so let's go through a quick reminder of what these sections are. The first one's going to be Best Bloodshed.
Right, now in Bloodshed, we're going to be looking for a spectacular scene of violence. Not necessarily a murder or a killing, but some kind of interesting violence, blood being shed, injuries being dealt out.
Definitely. The next category is Body Count, where we offer a rough count of the number of deaths in the saga.
I don't think it's a rough count. We try to be fairly accurate.
We try our best, but it's not always easy. Next category is Notable Witticisms.
Right, now in Notable Witticisms, we're looking for the one-liners, the clever bits of dialogue or description from the saga author.
And then Nicknames. Nicknames is a category where we just kind of catalog all the funny nicknames or interesting nicknames that people have in the Icelandic sagas.
This is usually a rich source of entertainment for us. We can't have something as beautiful as Thorbjorg's Shipbreast from our last saga, but we've usually got one or two real winners.
Next is Outlawry, and that's a category where we go through and look for someone who we find a little bit despicable, perhaps maybe a murderer, perhaps someone that we just don't like the cut of their jib, and we send them off the island. Next is Thingman.
Thingman, both Andy and I will choose a figure from the saga, a significant figure from the saga.
Are you calling into question
I want to be clear about that after Andy's skullduggery in the last episode.
It may have been a stretch.
But a significant figure from the saga to join our Thingmen, to support us at future things, to join our dream teams of saga figures.
And finally, we conclude with ratings, where John and I look at the saga and give it a rating between 1 and 10, with 10 being the best.
All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Our first category is Best Bloodshed. The first nominee, I think, has to be this very strange moment early in the saga when our four main male characters are engaging in a ritual by which they will all be pledged to one another in mutual support.
If you haven't listened to the first episode in a little while and you're kind of a little bit lazy in your Gisli saga listening,
shame on you.
The four people are as follows. You have the two brothers, that is Gisli and Thorkel Surson, and they have two brothers-in-law. The one is Thorgrim Gothi, a chieftain in the region, and Gisli is married to Aud, and her brother is Vestin Vestinson, and Gisli's quite attached to Vestin.
Right. Now, each brother is connected to one of the other brothers-in-law by business ties as well as by in-law status. So, in this moment, we have the four brothers and brothers-in-law who have heard a rumor that someone has predicted that their friendship will not last, and so they try to prove him wrong by conducting this very public and odd ritual in which, well, I'll just read very briefly from the saga here. They scored out a long strip of turf, making sure that both ends were still attached to the ground. Then they propped up the arch of raised turf with a Damasan spear so long shafted that a man could stretch out his arm and touch the rivets. All four of them had to go under it: Thorgrim, Gisli, Thorkel, and Vestin. Then they drew blood and let it drip down to the soil beneath the turf strip and stirred it together, the soil and the blood. Then they all fell to their knees and swore an oath that each would avenge the other as if they were brothers, and they called on all the gods as their witnesses. Now the pledge doesn't work out. Right? Thorgrim Gothi decides that he doesn't wish to be pledged to Vestin Vestinson, and Gisli, in support of Vestin, then pulls out of the pledge entirely. But the oath itself, the sort of ritual involved, is quite interesting.
It's not only interesting, but kind of beautiful. I mean, if you think about the way society works today, wouldn't it be cool if we had rituals like that to kind of bind us to each other?
Well, I think we still do. It's sort of, the rituals of childhood, right? Sort of spitting on your palms and shaking hands.
Yeah, I guess so. But there's a difference between two young boys doing that and two grown men creating a formal ritual with the cutting of the labor of cutting that turf out is quite something, probably, though maybe not for the Icelanders of the medieval period. But the whole ritual is interesting. I wonder if I asked you to cut some turf with me, would you be willing? Would you be willing to do that, John?
That depends. How many public witnesses would there have to be?
Oh, just one or two. Maybe just God.
Oh, I think we can go ahead and make ourselves a little turf fort.
As long as we can play with it afterwards.
Mixed of soil and blood.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a cool episode and definitely worthy of bloodshed. The next one that we're going to look at is the killing of Thorgrim. Now, we covered that one in pretty good detail in the part A of this episode, and so I'm not going to reread it, but I'll remind you that the killing of Thorgrim comes about after Thorkel or Thorgrim or someone kills Gisli's brother-in-law, Vestin Vestinson.
Right.
And we have a slap exchange and other kind of things, but Gisli sneaks into Thorgrim's house at night with the help of Geirmund. And then he creeps to the bed of Thorgrim and his sister, Thordis. He reaches out, grabs the first person he feels, which is Thordis, and feels her breast, and then is able to identify, I think, Thorgrim's body. And that's when he takes the old Grausida, the sword made anew, and pokes it all the way through Thorgrim, killing him. Gisli then runs out of the house and runs back to his place with his muddy boots.
Right, but it's worth. I mean, this is just. You say pokes it through him. He actually nails him to his bed.
Yeah.
I mean, the spear goes all the way through Thorgrim and pins him to the bed so that he cannot rise, and he just dies right there in bed.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive stuff.
It is impressive. I like that one. I'm going to say we have to also include Thorkel Surson, Gisli's brother, having his head chopped off with his own sword by the sons of Vestin Vestinson.
Yes, it's a very good one.
And we sort of covered this moment in the summary, so we won't go into it in great detail here. But first of all, I have to say, any man who hands his sword over to a complete stranger who asks to look at it, and then when the stranger draws the sword, merely says, "Hey, I didn't say you could do that," probably deserves to die.
Yeah, probably.
But the fact that it is a beheading, it's an actual full-on beheading with Thorkel's own sword at an assembly, it's pretty audacious. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it's very satisfying. I'm not a big Thorkel fan.
Fair enough.
All right, the next one for Best Bloodshed has to be, and I think this is a good candidate for the win, Aud. This is Gisli's wife.
Oh, Aud, okay.
Right?
Yes.
She is visited by Eyjolf, who is kind of stalking. He's one of the bounty hunters that's looking for Gisli. And he can't ever find Gisli. And when he does, Gisli slips right through his fingers. So eventually he comes to Aud and says, "Look, I'm just going to give you a lot of money, and please just take it." And she sits there counting the silver.
Well, and betray your husband in exchange for the money. Let's be clear about what he wants for the money.
Yes. Eyjolf counts out the silver for Aud, and she's got this massive purse sitting there in her lap. And I'll just read a little bit from this scene because it's a nice one, and you get a little bit of a sense of Aud's cleverness and wit.
Mm-hmm.
So Eyjolf had counted out all the silver, and Aud spoke. "By no means is the silver any less or worse than you have said, and now you must agree that I may do with it whatever I wish." Eyjolf gladly agreed and told her that of course she might do as she wished with it. Aud took the silver and put it in a large purse, and then she stood up and struck Eyjolf on the nose, and blood spurted all over him. "Take that for your gullibility," she said, "and all the harm that ensues from it. There was never any hope that I would render my husband into your hands, you evil man. Take this now for your cowardice and your shame, and remember, you wretch, for as long as you live that a woman has struck you." Now,
that's just brutal.
Yeah. Eyjolf asks his men to seize her and kill her, and obviously they don't.
Right.
Aud is an awesome woman.
Mm-hmm. Eyjolf, I have to say, really comes across throughout this saga as just, kind of a scuzzy individual.
Yeah, he does.
Just sort of almost like a bounty hunter, but not doing shame to other bounty hunters.
Yeah. He's not the cool bounty hunter. He's the kind of weak and cowardly bounty hunter.
Right. He's not, to do a Star Wars metaphor, he's not Boba Fett. He's Bosk.
Of course you'd come up with that.
It's all right. Like 4 people understood what I was talking about there.
Not me.
They agree with me entirely.
I should note, because I just did a little bit of reading there, that my wife listened to a little bit of our silly accents from Part A. And
yes?
She said that we sound like cheap Ren Fair goofballs.
Really?
Yeah, she says...
I didn't think it was cheap.
She said that we just
I resent the cheap.
Adjust our R's slightly and try to talk in deeper voices, and we end up sounding like buffoons.
Is that... Wait, did she hear the John Wayne Gisli?
She didn't mention the John Wayne. Sorry.
All right. Well,
I'm sure she loved that part. What's next?
Anyway, right. So Aud smacking Eyjolf across the face, breaking his nose, bloodying his nose. Just a brilliant moment.
Yeah, it is.
But of course, the heavy hitter has to be included, and that's Gisli's last stand.
Yeah.
A huge scene. I mean, there's so much that we can't even read it to you because it would take too long to get through it all. We have Helgi the spy, who's probably the only semi-competent member of Eyjolf's crew. He's the first one up the hill, and he, of course, is cut in half by the first swing of Gisli's axe. Mm-hmm. We have a large number of men cut down, wounded by Gisli. Finally, Gisli himself deeply wounded, to so greatly that his entrails begin to spill out of his stomach.
Yeah.
And then he ties his shirt in order to bind up the entrails so that they don't fall out of him and kill him before he finishes fighting.
Right.
And then, with his last breath, leaping down off of a crag and splitting one of his enemies down the middle.
Yeah, it's really brilliant.
With his sword.
One of the best fight sequences in Saga literature, I think.
Really is. And of course, as we know, Gisli wounds these other men so badly that several more of them die in the days and years to follow from their wounds from this fight.
Yeah. John, I don't know if you know, but there's an Icelandic movie of Gisli's saga that I found on YouTube.
You know, I know that there is one. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I pulled it up, and
what do you think?
I didn't watch the whole thing yet. I'm going to watch it over the holidays, and I just jumped forward because I was really curious. I couldn't resist jumping forward to looking at this final scene because it's such an awesome.
You're spoiling the ending for yourself.
No, I already know it because I read the story. I wanted to see how they dealt with that whole entrails falling out thing, and I also just wanted to see how they dealt with the action.
Spaghetti and meatballs.
Yeah, well, they've definitely got the whole business there. They've got the two women, and they have them throwing buckets of water and whatever they've got handy, but they're all kind of slowly climbing these rocks. And then the Gisli's entrails thing is handled with him basically just tightening his belt with a blood red shirt. Not terribly impressive, but it looks like a 70s movie. Maybe I'm not sure when it dates to exactly, but it looks a little bit old. They got big bushy hair, but it was kind of cool.
Well, and you wouldn't want to create kind of a cheesy, horror movie effect at that point. This isn't supposed to be about the entrail spilling out. It's supposed to be about Gisli refusing to allow them to spill out.
Well, what's cool about it is they separate the women, and then they find they push Gisli up onto what is essentially a cliff, and he's got like 4 or 5 guys kind of coming at him. And then some other guy who, I don't know what the actor was doing, but he looked to me like he was just stumbling into the scene. He kind of comes into the scene in the grassy area, and Gisli looks down.
To be clear, this is the film.
Yeah, it's the film.
Right.
Gisli looks down and sees him and is like, oh, there's a good opportunity. And he jumps down this gigantic cliff and lands on the guy, and I think he hits him in the head with his axe or something like that.
Sure.
But that's the end of both those characters. So anyway,
and possibly the actors, depending on how well
no kidding. Well, it looked like
handled the stunt.
It looked like quite a jump. So we'll post that movie up on the site in a couple days.
Yeah. Well, okay, I think we could dawdle about this, but I don't think there's any question.
No.
I mean, Gisli's last stand is without question one of the greatest moments of bloodshed in the sagas.
Yeah, anytime your intestines are hanging out and you have the wherewithal to pull them back into your stomach and continue fighting, that's good stuff.
And then say as he does at that moment, all right, everybody just hang on a minute. You'll get what you want.
Yeah. I'm going to die in a minute. Just give me a second. Yeah, it's good stuff.
No, I think, without question, Gisli is our winner.
Gisli's definitely the winner.
What a scene. What a death. Can't be beat.
He's brilliant. So, John, before we jump into our next category, which is going to be body count, we should discuss this whole business of Gisli grabbing his sister's breast. There's a whole lot been made of that.
In the Thorgrim death.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, we mentioned it kind of in the summary and again here in Best Bloodshed. So let's put this one to rest really quickly.
Yeah, and I think it's not worth spending a lot of time on because I think you and I are both agreed that this is sort of one of those moments when scholars get a bit sweaty palm for no particularly good reason.
Right.
But there's definitely there is a strain of scholarship that believes that this saga even centers around this illicit love between Gisli and Thordis that dare not speak its name.
Yeah, let me read to you really quickly. I just, in setting up the website post for this saga, I pulled up the Gisli saga from Penguin Classics, which comes with the saga of the Eyrbyggja saga. It says something really silly. It says Gisli Sorson's saga is a story of forbidden love and divided loyalties. And I'm thinking to myself, where's the forbidden love?
Forbidden?
But of course, I know that scholars, some scholars anyways, get very excited about this issue of Gisli grabbing his sister's breast. And it's something we bring up in class when we teach this, obviously. What are they so worked up about? Why can't he grab his sister's breast, John?
Well, I think... I hope your sister has a good answer for this. No, I mean, this is, in the moment, this is clearly a situation where Gisli we're meant to understand that he's fumbling around in the dark.
Yeah, and I think, if you think about it, Gisli knows he's looking for Thorgrim, but he knows that...
Well, and remember, we've been explicitly told that the room is fully dark.
Exactly.
Because Gisli and Geirmund have put out all the lights in the room.
Right. Now,
so he's stumbling around in a pitch black room. Remember that Thordis is also 8 or 9 months pregnant at this point.
I had
She's
not
a
even thought
larger
about
profile.
That. You're absolutely right.
Than she would be normally. And so he's trying to find which of these two bulky figures in a bed is Thorgrim, and he simply guesses wrong. Right.
I don't know if
my reading of it is... Sorry?
And it's not just that, it's that, why wouldn't you grab down at the legs? Well, probably, I would imagine Thordis's legs are very hairy and thick, just like her husband's. And so probably not a good identifier. So you gotta go for the...
But if we're thinking seriously...
Oh, okay.
There's... now you've completely made me lose track of what I was going to say. I don't know how to respond to that. Well, but to be serious, the question here is, you've got two people in the bed. One of them is his sister. He's not interested in stabbing randomly into the bed until Thorgrim shouts.
Right.
He needs to make sure that he strikes once and successfully. But it also, I think, that moment is meant to heighten the tension. Right? It's that classic moment, anytime somebody is sneaking into a bedroom in any drama, where the person snorts and rolls over, right, and the audience is meant to go, oh, he's going to be caught. That it's that moment when he rouses his sister, and she sort of begins mumbling to Thorgrim, and they have this conversation with him hovering over them, holding his breath, trying not to be found. Scholars have made a great deal out of this, and in fairness to them, we should also point out that it's not the only time that Gisli gives evidence of potentially strong feelings for his sister.
Right. I
Remember
guess
that he has, on multiple occasions, killed suitors of his sisters, and in one case killed a man who apparently was already sleeping with her.
Right. I mean, when we first meet Gisli, the whole story is about how he's going around and killing the different men that Thordis has apparently been seeing, perhaps sleeping with, but at the very least having a kind of flirty relationship with.
Right. Although it's clear in the moment that Gisli's father, Thorbjorn, is actually encouraging him to take action.
Exactly.
Right. He says at one point, he shames his sons at one point by saying, if Ari, i.e. the youngest of my sons, were here, this wouldn't be allowed to go on.
It turns out Ari is a man of action, doesn't it? With the
whole
it does. End, right? He's not around very often, but when he's around, he gets the job done.
Absolutely. The man in red.
Yeah.
But it's made very clear that Thorbjorn encourages and supports Gisli in killing these suitors because he finds them unacceptable.
Right, and that's one of the first sequences where we start to see the difference between Gisli and Thorkel. I mean, Thorkel... It's Thorkel's friend who's been seeing, if you remember, it's Bard who's been seeing Thordis, and Thorkel is in full support of Bard, and he disregards his father's wishes. So here we get a sense of Thorkel's kind of sense of family and his lack of loyalty, I guess, to his family, which contrasts directly with Gisli's sense of family, which is very, very deep.
Right, and we can't forget that Thorkel is actually, his feelings for his family are so shallow that he actually encourages Skeggi the Dueler to come take revenge by presumably killing Gisli for Bard's death, and then claiming Thordis as his prize after that fight.
Oh, Thorkel.
So he's actually sort of pushing another man into coming in, killing a member of his family, and then riding off with Thordis.
Exactly. Now, so to summarize and kind of conclude this whole big business about Thordis's breast, I don't think that Gisli is in any way interested in his sister. He is merely trying to protect her throughout the whole saga. I think he does love her, but loves her like a big brother, even though she's older than him, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Yes, she's the oldest of the four of them.
Right. And that's just it. He's a good brother, and he is protecting his family, protecting his family's name, and protecting their honor. And that is the essence of Gisli Sórsson.
Yeah, so I think while there's a reason for these scholars to make an argument, I think it's, in the end, I don't find it to be meritorious at all, and I don't think there's any reason for us to take it seriously.
Exactly.
Body count.
So for the body count, we had a pretty miraculous thing happened. John and I came up with the same number.
Unprecedented.
Yeah, it was weird. Usually we sit and argue about it forever. The number this time is 75.
75. Now, of course, because we agreed for the first time, it turns out the saga disagrees with both of us.
Yeah, it's never easy, is it?
No, there's always something. So we came up with a total of 75. Now, this saga gets itself off to a great start. We have 36 people killed before they even leave Norway in the third chapter.
Yeah. Well, it helps that a whole household, if you remember Thorbjorn, that is Gisli's father's house, is set afire, and 12 people die. And then in his wrath, Gisli goes ahead and kills 12 to kind of seek vengeance. So that's a good 24 right there.
Right. But where we run into trouble is right toward the end of the saga, at Gisli's last stand. We have this astounding fight that we've just talked about. But in it, Gisli cuts down several men, and the saga, we think, loses track of just how many.
Right.
And specifically, there's one man, Helgi the Spy is the first one to die. He's cut in half.
He gets cut in half.
Right.
In a beautiful, beautiful,
absolutely. But following that, another man runs up to Gisli and says, and I'll read this to you, "Lay down your fine weapons and give them all to me. And give me your wife, Aud, too."
Now you sound like Bane a little bit. Give me your wife, Aud, too.
I haven't actually seen that movie, but thank you. Gisli answered him, "Then show your courage, because neither befits you. Neither my weapons nor my wife."
That's not John Wayne at
That's
all.
fine. It's Gisli. Gisli's coming to his own.
Okay.
Now,
good.
what's interesting about this, one, this is sort of a theme of this saga, right? The men who challenge you to a fight and upon killing you intend to steal your wife. Now, this, of course, is something that we've seen several times in the saga already. Gisli responds to this with great violence and, in fact, attacks this man so violently that Gisli's own axe shatters, and he's then forced to defend himself with his sword. Which is an interesting note, just to contrast with kind of the typical European image of the Middle Ages. Sword versus axe. Right.
Most people would rather have a sword, it seems. But in Iceland and Scandinavia, the axe is the weapon of choice. I always think of it just the axe would get stuck in someone in a way that you can't get it out.
Well, I think the idea is to keep going, like you did with Helgi. Right, just go right through the person, and you don't have a problem.
Right through them. Yeah, I guess it is a good weapon that way.
But the problem is that then Gisli kills some other men, and the saga at one point tells us that the total is now 4 men, which indicates pretty clearly that the man with the spear was killed when Gisli shattered his axe on him, which frankly makes sense. But then later on, we're told that the total number of men who die from wounds received by Gisli is 8, but it's very clearly 9 men. It's Helgi, it's the spearman, it's 2 more of Eyjolf's men, it's a man named Sven, then it's Thord, Eyjolf's kinsman, who dies when Gisli leaps off the crag and splits him in half, and then 3 more men die of their wounds after the battle is over, which is a clear total of 9.
Right.
So we're sticking with the number 75, even though the saga seems to think it's 74. We're pretty sure we're right on this one.
Yep, but we'll forgive him that because it's such a great saga.
There you go.
75 deaths.
Nicknames.
All right, we're on to the category of nicknames. And
Yes.
John, I'm going to be honest here. I forgot to write down any nicknames for this one, so I'm going to let you lead.
Well, I've got quite a list. So this saga actually gives us a large number of options. It's maybe not quite as rich in bizarre names as, say, Eyrbyggja saga, but certainly plenty to work with. So, for starters, we can't ignore Thorbjorn Sur.
That's right. If you remember, and I do remember this guy, John, so this is a good one to bring up first. He's the guy who his house is set on fire, and he devises a kind of noble escape by dipping some skins in whey and then using them to beat back the flames.
Right.
And that's where he gets his name, Sur, which means sour or whey.
Right. We've got Thord the Coward, of course, the useless servant of Gisli Sursson.
Although poor Thord gets the take the old take my jacket trick.
Well, you know, I mean, in the end, I suppose he does serve that one purpose.
He certainly does.
We've got back in Norway, we have Holmgang Skeggi, or Skeggi the Dueler. Mainly notable because, again, anytime you defeat someone named the Dueler one-on-one, it's pretty impressive, and Gisli does. Actually fights Skeggi twice. The first time he lops off Skeggi's leg, and the second time it's not so much of a fight as Gisli sneaking up on Skeggi while he's in bed and killing him.
Right.
So I don't know if it's really a fight the second time.
Well.
We have Helgi the Spy.
Helgi the Spy, the guy who gets cut in half.
Absolutely. It's a great name, Helgi the Spy. He's actually, as you said, he's not a terribly effective spy. He's often easily fooled. He's led astray by red herrings. But in the end, he's the only one with any kind of marketable bounty hunting skill. Everybody else just seems to sort of run around randomly wherever they hear a rumor that Gisli may have been.
Again, go to Aud's house. He's
right,
probably
just
at
stay
Aud's
at
house.
Aud's house. We have Helgi, Ingjald's fool, the son of Ingjald the Islander. And we said last time that the name Ingjald's fool is suggestive, but his life is even more suggestive of the kind of harsh treatment that a person could expect in this society if they had a disability that kept them from sort of living independently and from taking care of themselves. Right? It's not an environment that's forgiving of people who sort of need help to survive.
Right. The fact that he's Ingjald's fool suggests that even his name lacks value. He's not even considered Helgi the fool. He's not even a person.
Right. He's not Ingjald's son, which should be his surname. He's Ingjald's fool. So he's almost unmanned by his mental disability.
Exactly.
We have Berg Skamfot. Berg the short-legged, that means, which can mean one of two things. Either he's simply short, right? You think of Robert Curthose in British history. Same thing, right? Gets his name because of his short stature.
Who knows that person?
I do. He's the Duke of Normandy. Or short leg could conceivably mean that his one leg is shorter than the other and that he limps.
Right.
I like to think that he's just a short guy.
That's generous of you.
Well, we have Saga Stein, or Outlaw Stein, is what that means. One of the men who are part of the original group who are tracking Gisli. He doesn't make it to the final stand because Gisli has already killed him by then, along with his brother Thorod.
We don't really know why he's called Outlaw Stein, and it's kind of curious that you'd have a nickname being Outlaw, but maybe he was outlawed for like a lesser outlawry and had gone away for a while and come back.
But of course it also suggests something, one of those sort of obscure things about the practice of outlawry. Outlaws often were given reprieve if they killed other outlaws. If they were sort of collected the bounty on a number of other outlaws, they themselves would then be freed. It's a brilliant piece of social engineering when you think about it, because it stops the outlaws from ganging up on you. Right?
Yeah.
The group that we saw in Eyrbyggja Saga, Osbeck's group, is kind of an aberration. For the most part, the problem with outlaws is that they can gain their freedom by killing each other. So it's very difficult for them to band together and become a menace to the rest of Iceland. So Outlaw Stein may possibly be someone who's actually hunting Gisli down in hopes of gaining his own reinstatement into society. And then, of course, last but not least, Bork the Stout.
Bork the Stout.
Now, his nickname is worth considering on its own, but I just want to point out that Bork, that's a rough name. That is when you're already called Bork, I think it's important that you try to keep yourself in fighting shape. Because if your name is Bork and you're a bit rotund, you're just you have nothing going for you at that point. So that's our list. That's our category. What do you think?
I'm voting for Thorbjorn Sur. He's he's got a cool story with his nickname. We don't get a lot of stories with the other nicknames. And it's a great story at that. I
mean, it stamps the entire saga, right? I mean, this legendary story about how he and his sons have the wherewithal to get out of this burning house. Absolutely.
It's important enough to replace your own name in your children's future. So how could you ignore that?
Absolutely. Thorbjorn Sur it is. Congratulations. Notable witticisms. All right, notable witticisms. This is our chance to look at some of the saga writers' best lines. I've got a couple of nominees. I know you do as well.
I do.
I want to start us off with Helgi Vestensson. This is the moment immediately after he and his brother Berg have assassinated Thorkel Sursen and are running away in the anarchy that ensues at the Thorskfjord Assembly.
Yeah. It's a very quick scene, but it's like one of the coolest scenes in the saga.
It really is. And what I love about it is that the things are so disordered that Bork the Stout himself stops the Vestensons to ask them what happened.
Yeah.
Not realizing that they're the murderers.
Right.
And he asks them why there's a commotion at Thorkel's booth. And Helgi's response is, I think they're wondering about whether Vestin left only daughters behind him or whether he had a son.
Is that how you're going to read it?
It
sounds awful.
What do you want me to say?
It's very light. I think it should sound more serious.
Well, they're running.
It's weighty.
They
sounded kind of jaunty.
I think. Well, they're running. Hell, it was all I could do not to give you a Doppler effect. I think they're arguing with the Vestin.
I don't know about that one.
All right. Okay.
All right. My first candidate is going to be Geirmund. If you remember, Geirmund is asked by Thorgrim to go and get the tapestries that Vestin Vestinson had left from Gisli's house. A very kind of audacious and arrogant move on Thorgrim's part. Geirmund doesn't want to do it. He knows that it's going to be a mess, and it's very insulting to Gisli. But Thorgrim slaps Geirmund across the face. Geirmund looks at Thorgrim and says, "But you may be certain that I will give a mare for this foal, and you will not be underpaid." It's not something that I would ever say.
Well, it's a nice turn of phrase. It is. I think one of those idioms that you pick up in the sagas sometimes.
Yeah, and again, if you're not sure what that means, think about it. A mare compared to a foal. Which one's bigger, more valuable, etc., etc. He was given a foal. He's going to repay him with a mare, which means Thorgrim's probably going to die that night. It's a good line.
He does, in fact, as it goes, he does get a chance for revenge.
Exactly. For a servant, or is he a slave, John? I can't remember.
He is, yeah.
Yeah, so for a slave, that's a hell of a line.
Yep, absolutely. My next nominee has to be Gisli speaking to Aud at the Last Stand. After Gisli has cut Helgi the Spy in half, Eyjolf the Grey attempts to sneak up behind Gisli, but he finds his way blocked by Aud, Vestin's daughter, who she's only been able to arm herself with a club that she sort of picked up off the ground, but she faces him down, smashes the club down on his sword arm, and renders him useless for the fight. Paralyzes his arm for the moment, and forces him to drop his weapon. And Gisli, upon seeing this, takes a moment out of this sort of desperate fight that he's in to say, "I knew long ago that I had married well." Oh, I'm sorry. This is Gisli's voice. "I knew long ago that I'd married well, but never realized till now that the match was as good as this."
I can't wait till this episode is over so we don't do the John Wayne impression anymore.
It's not really a John Wayne impression anymore. Gisli has sort of become his own entity.
He is. So my next nominee, and I think the last one, is from the episode where Gisli's been hiding at Ingjold's house. And Ingjold is a relative of Gisli's, and you might remember him as the father of Helgi the Fool, who's tied to a post and allowed to graze like an animal. Ingjold is confronted by Bork after Gisli's escaped, and Bork is asking him to give up Gisli. Says, "Where is he? And if you don't tell me, I'm going to kill you." Ingjold has a very witty response. He says, "My clothes are so poor that it would be no great grief if I stopped wearing them out."
That's good stuff.
So, John, what do you think should be the winner there?
You know what? There's some good stuff in here. I do like a mare for the foal. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to push hard here for Helgi Vestinson. In the moment of running away from an assassination, having time to drop a one-liner on Bork as he runs past, about whether Vestin left only daughters behind him or whether he had a son.
Yeah, just the fact that they come into the saga and out of the saga so quickly and have the wherewithal to come up with a line like that. Mm-hmm. You know, I was going to push for Ingjold myself because I like the idea of wearing out the clothes. I know you love that line. Yeah, but Helgi's so clever. I'm giving it to Helgi, too. I agree with you.
Excellent. Congratulations, Helgi. Maybe this is some consolation that your brother will later on be chopped down by Ari Sursen in Norway. Outlawed. So now we have to pick somebody from the saga who's going to be eliminated from future consideration for thingmen, going to be eliminated from the island forever. we have only a handful of options in this saga, I think.
Yeah, the problem with this saga is that nobody really does anything egregiously wrong. There's no Auspex
I'm going to have to disagree with you there.
Oh, maybe there's a murder or two.
Well, a murder, I mean, this is not a killing, right? This is a murder.
Okay.
We've talked about this before on the podcast. The laws in Iceland were quite strict as to what constituted a legal killing.
Mm-hmm.
And the killing of, let's be right up front. Gisli's murder of Thorgrim violates every rule of a legal killing. This is, without question, a secret murder, and it's the kind of thing that can very easily get you outlawed.
Right. Well, it's called an outlaw saga for a reason.
Exactly. I mean, we have to consider the fact that our main character, Gisli Sursun, is not only guilty of murder, but is in fact outlawed within the saga for that murder.
True, but he's so likable.
I have a feeling I'm going to have a hard time convincing you of Gisli just because you deferred on Thingman last time. I think because you had your eye on Gisli already at that point.
He's such an attractive candidate.
But it does mean you've got to come up with, if you're not going to give me Gisli, you got to give me a better candidate for outlawry than Gisli Sursun.
We'll see.
What do you got?
Well, John, have you considered Eyjolf, the bounty hunter?
What did Eyjolf do? I mean, Gisli sneaks into a man's home in the middle of the night.
Sure.
Kills him in his sleep. Doesn't even give Thorgrim a chance to defend himself. And nails him to the bed with a spear.
Well,
what did Eyjolf do that's worse than that?
Well, Eyjolf is a coward. I don't know if you remember, but Eyjolf not only fails miserably at catching his prey, but he's constantly pushing other people to the fore, to the point that when he asks Helgi, the spy, to go up and get Gisli off the cliff, Helgi says something to the effect of, "I've often noticed," said Helgi, "that you usually want other people in front of you when there's any danger. Since you urge me so profoundly, I'll attempt it, but you must show enough courage to come with me and keep close behind. That is, if you're not a completely toothless bitch." Why wasn't that a notable witticism, John?
I don't know. We're definitely asleep at the switch here.
We missed that one. That's a good one.
But we have to point out, I mean, this is cowardice.
Yeah, cowardice. He's a pretty bad guy.
He's not guilty. I mean, cowardice is contemptible, perhaps, but it's not illegal. It's hardly against the law to be a coward.
Well, yeah, but you've got to consider why Gisli killed Thorgrim. I think you're forgetting that. Yes, maybe he's hiding what he did to some extent. But he killed him as an act of honor. It's part of the vengeance oath. John, if you remember, Gisli's the one that took the reforged Grasida out of Vestin Vestinson. And as the saga tells us, that is a sacred duty to avenge the person that you're taking the weapon or the sword out of.
Fair enough, but I don't remember anything saying that the sacred duty involved sneaking by stealth in the night into someone's house and killing them while they sleep.
I see. You think you should have been a little bit more public about it.
Well, that seems to be, the expectation of the time.
Interesting. Well, then let me ask you this. Who killed Vestin Vestinson? Shouldn't we consider them?
Now that's interesting.
Because we got two good candidates there, right?
Absolutely. Right. The saga goes out of its way to avoid telling us who killed Vestin Vestinson. We know that the spear, right, the reforged blade that came from the sword Grasida, is a possession of the Sursun family.
Right.
And Thorkel, without question, we know, is the person who owned the blade.
Right. And that seems to suggest that Thorkel is the one that killed Vestin.
But of course, we also know that his friend Thorgrim Gothi is by his side when the blade is reforged.
Right.
And is involved in sort of every step of the way, and that the two of them are partners in everything they do.
Sure. But that presumes that Thorkel asked Thorgrim to go ahead and do this when Thorkel's the one with the real grudge against Vestin, because Thorkel's wife has been given the old eye, the winky to Vestin.
Absolutely. But we know that both Thorkel and Thorgrim are the sorts of people who might use an interlocum or a catspaw to commit an act that they didn't want themselves to be involved in.
Sure.
So either one of them could theoretically have done it at the behest of the other or for themselves.
Perhaps, but I don't think Thorgrim has anything against Vestin, whereas Thorkel clearly does. The more likely scenario is that either Thorkel does it or Thorkel asks Thorgrim to do it for him because he doesn't want to strike out against his own brother-in-law or his brother's best friend.
Now, one more piece of evidence that I will give you, of course, if you think back to Eyrbyggja Saga, the author there gives us an encapsulated version of the story of Gisli's saga.
Mm-hmm.
And in that version, the author tells us that Gisli killed Thorgrim because Thorgrim had killed Vestin Vestinson the year before.
Right.
So in that saga, there's no question as to who the murderer is. It's taken as a matter of record that Thorgrim the Gothi, Snorri's father, was the murderer of Vestin Vestinson.
Right, and that suggests there's a tradition within Iceland, or at least within that region, that says Thorgrim is the one that did the deed.
Right. But I agree with you. I think all the evidence of the text points to Thorkel as the murderer.
Right.
There's ample reason for Thorkel to want Vestin dead.
Right.
As you said, he's been messing around, or possibly messing around with Thorkel's wife. Thorgrim, apart from not wanting to be involved in a blood oath with Vestin, has no particular animus against him whatsoever.
Exactly. He's got very little stake in this thing.
And we have that line that Gisli says to Thorkel after the burial of Vestin. He says, when or if something occurs that touches you the way this touched me, I expect you to show the same restraint that I'm showing with you right now.
Exactly.
Right. So in other words, when I kill your best friend, brother-in-law, and business partner, just as you have killed mine, you need to remember this moment and that I didn't expose you and take revenge on you.
Exactly.
And we know that Thorkel does uphold that part of the bargain. We know that Thorkel is not big on this brotherly bond, but when he is the first man to enter Gisli's house after Thorgrim's death, what does he find?
Muddy shoes, icy shoes.
Muddy, icy shoes, right? And he hides them, he shoves them under Gisli's bed so that no one else sees them.
Exactly.
Right? So he does uphold his bargain with Gisli to protect Gisli from the consequences of this killing.
Exactly. So here's the thing, John.
Yep.
Rather than outlaw Gisli, we should consider very seriously outlawing either Thorkel or Thorgrim. Now, my vote is going for Thorkel because not only is Thorkel the mastermind or perhaps even the murderer of Vestin, and that is a murder.
Yes.
We also have to consider character. And if you compare Gisli's character to Thorkel's character, what you find is one man who is fiercely loyal to his family and upholds the traditions of honor and love and respect for his kin relations. And then you have Thorkel, who puts all those things aside constantly, whether it's down to supporting Bard and Skeggi the Dueler, in fact asking Skeggi the Dueler to kill his own brother. Thorkel is a shameful individual. He's not an admirable character and in my opinion, worthy of outlawry.
I'm going to agree with you, and here's why.
You're a generous soul.
Because I firmly believe, in my reading of this text, I firmly believe that Thorkel is the murderer. Mm-hmm. Not that he is merely the person who arranges the murder, but that he himself actually conducts the murder.
Right.
The weapon that's used to kill Vestin is a family blade, right? It's Grasida.
Right.
It's the blade that Thorkel received from their father when their father died. There's no particular reason to believe that anyone else would be wielding that weapon. It is Thorkel, not Thorgrim, who has the desire to see Vestin dead. Mm-hmm. It's Thorkel who would need to do it by stealth, right? Because he is actually connected through Gisli's marriage to Aud to Vestin,
right?
Where Thorgrim is not. And so Thorgrim could actually kill Vestin openly if he felt the need to do so. Thorkel has more of a reason to do it by stealth.
Yeah.
And the use of that weapon serves as a kind of code to Gisli.
Right.
That this killing was done by your brother, who you value so greatly, and so you need to conduct yourself very carefully. And Gisli receives that message. When he takes that weapon from Vestin's chest, he immediately hides it so that no one else can see the weapon that was used.
Right.
And he doesn't take it out of his chest, out of the box that he keeps it in, until he brings it and uses that same weapon to kill Thorgrim, thus returning the message to Thorkel.
Right. And restoring balance.
So, absolutely.
And that's what it's all about.
Well, and of course, Gisli's killing of Thorgrim is a secret murder, yes, but it's a secret murder that mimics in every particular the killing of Vestin a year before.
Exactly.
Right? Even down to the sneaking into the house and killing a man while he sleeps.
Mm-hmm. So you're with me.
So for all those reasons, I'm with you. I think Thorkel's got to go.
All right. That sets up a beautiful Thingman section for me.
I realize it does, but I think you've made a fair argument, and it gels with my own reading of the text. So Thorkel Surson, off you go.
Sorry, pal.
Maybe you can recover the boat that you gave to your brother and use it to leave the island.
Thingman.
All right, now we're into our Thingman section. John, this is actually my favorite thing that we do, choosing Thingman.
Yeah. I like it usually. I think this time out, I'm going to like it a little bit less.
Really?
Because you've clearly set me up for a fall here.
Yeah, I didn't like it as much in that last saga. But I like it because, when I'm reading the sagas, I'm always looking at those characters, and I think we're meant to look at the characters and investigate their morality, investigate their essence deeply. And this is a great one because Gisli is such a profoundly good character. He's all about honor. He is all about family. He represents all those things that we think of when we think of nobility.
So you're not even going to keep us in suspense here. It's pretty clear from the outset where you're going with this.
I think that was clear in the last episode when I deferred that I was going to be taking Gisli. I knew that we were going to be doing Gisli Saga. I admired Gisli very deeply. Even though he is an outlaw, he represents some pretty fantastic things. Family, honor, loyalty, love of your wife, love of your father, love of your siblings, all that kind of stuff. I'd like to say I'm that kind of guy, but I don't know that
you can say it all you want. But
yeah, I'm not going to take a sword for them, but whatever. Anyway, I'm choosing Gisli for what he represents. He's pretty amazing. And good name recognition there, too.
No, that's fair. That's actually a good point. No, there's no question.
I should also add that there's not a lot of other great choices in this saga.
Right, well, there's the problem.
Pickings are slim.
So, of course, the problem for me now is what do you do with Gisli's saga once Gisli's not in it?
Yeah, you've got Eyolf and Helgi the Spy and Bork the Stout.
Well, we've already outlawed his brother Thorkel.
Thorgrim the Gothi, he's available for you.
Well, see, now I was going to say, I don't want any of Gisli's enemies involved. So it looks to me, once I start shaking it all out, because it's pretty clear. I mean, this is one of those sort of good and evil sagas. I mean, really, no one who's against Gisli is a good person.
I know you could choose Thor the Coward.
Well, right. So the way I see it, I've got the entire Surson family less Thorkel to choose from. I've got Thorbjorn Sur. I've Ari Surson.
He's pretty amazing. You know he's a man of action.
He is pretty amazing. I mean, he doesn't spend a lot of time in the saga, but he makes his time count.
Yes, he does.
We, of course, have to consider, once you get outside the family, Ref the Sly, although we've actually talked about this, and for the simple reason that Ref has his own saga, we can't be snatching him up right now, because it would make for an awkward conversation when we finally get to Ref's saga later on.
Right. And hopefully I'll be choosing then.
Yeah. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to take Thorbjorn Sur. He doesn't do a tremendous amount in terms of activity. He mainly encourages his sons to kill people, and he puts out a fire with Way.
Yeah, he's very clever.
Right. Ari is a great character for the 8 seconds that he's in the saga.
Yeah, but if you're looking for action density, then he's your man.
Well, but if you're looking for an actual sort of name recognition figure, or if you're looking for a figure who has some evidence that he's a loyal thingman, I don't think you find it in Ari. What you find is that he's a loyal brother.
Right.
No, I think I'm going to have to make the unprecedented step here. I am taking Aud Vestin's daughter.
Wow.
Gisli's wife.
Wow. The first female.
Absolutely. The first female. It's time that we broke that glass ceiling and opened up the thing person.
Is that what it is going to be from now on, the thing person category?
Well, when it refers, or the thing woman, I would be proud for Aud to be my thing woman.
That's a wonderful choice, actually.
She is unbelievable. I mean, just, both fearless and loyal. She manages to outfight Eyolf the Grey not once but twice, smashing his nose across his face and then smashing his arm to the ground.
Right.
She is loyal to Gisli throughout the saga. And, by the way, unlike many of the figures that both of us have chosen so far, she lives past the end of the saga.
That is
she actually
high quality.
converts to Christianity and goes off on a pilgrimage to Rome at the end of the saga.
That's a great choice. Honestly, I hadn't really considered her until we were recording the first part of this episode. And as we were going through kind of the action and talking about what she does, it occurred to me, this woman is amazing, and I would totally take her as a thingman if I wasn't going first. If Gisli wasn't the option, she would be the one that I would have chosen.
Well, of course, the great tragedy here is that the loyal marriage between Gisli and Oude, it will now be tested as they find themselves on opposite sides of our thingmen.
Yeah, that's too bad. Oh, well.
That's all right. Maybe it'll bring our groups closer together.
Yes.
Final rating.
All right, moment of truth. It's time for us to decide how to rate this saga on a scale from 1 to 10. I think I'm going to go first this week.
Okay.
It's worth noting, I mean, we talked about this at the very beginning of the first part of this episode. Scholars have a love affair with Gisli Saga, right? And it's not hard to see why. I mean, the story is tightly narrated. It makes room for a remarkable amount of detail in a short amount of time. The central feud is both, I would say, logical and inevitable. I mean, there's no sense in which we're just kind of, well, you have to have a feud because it's the saga. This is all sort of, there's logical reasons for everything to happen. The story is fully fleshed out. We have a good-sized cast of secondary characters that we get to know. You think about Ingjald and his family, Helgi the spy, Thorgerd the outlaw hiding grandma, Thorgrim Neff, Thord the coward, just on and on and on with the great characters.
Yeah. I think for how little space they're actually given, you're right. We get to know them pretty well as in terms of them feeling like real people.
Yep. No, it's the saga author is just a really economical writer, and this stuff is all, any good saga maybe has all that stuff. But I'm going to say what makes Gisli Saga truly great is the psychological depth and nuance that we find in the central group. Gisli Sursen, Thorkel Sursen, Thordis Sur's daughter. We talked a number of times about how complicated Thordis's motivations are in the saga. Sort of the pressures that she's under as the sister and wife of two men, one of whom kills the other.
Interesting.
And then, of course, the mother of Snorri Gothi, who's then in that position of feeling pressure socially to take some kind of revenge for his father's death, despite the fact that this is his mother's brother.
Perhaps I think the saga is one of contrasts, right? Thorkel is a contrast in his disloyalty to Gisli's loyalty. Likewise, Thordis represents a kind of disloyal, maybe kind of wishy-washy goofball of a wife and woman. She contrasts greatly to Oude, who is loyal and steadfast throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. And I think the way that the saga author really brings all those contrasts out is by making small details do heavy work to create character nuance. Right? So
absolutely.
In Thordis's conflicted loyalties, we could do an entire podcast episode just on Thordis and what she's up to. But when you count it up, there's only a couple of hundred words spent on her in the entire saga. The strength of Gisli and Oude's marriage is sketched in brief moments of the text, and it kind of sneaks into the narrative without our really realizing it, until by the end of the saga we come to realize that it's both the source of Gisli's strength, even as it becomes a weakness for his enemies to exploit.
Right.
And then there's the complexity of kin loyalty pitted against friendships, pitted against economic relationships, all of it revealed in this kind of minimalist prose. And then we get the murder mystery, the hair's breadth escapes, the cat and mouse game between Gisli and Helgi the spy, the repeated skirmishes, and all of it leading up to this absolutely epic last stand. I could nitpick things here and there in the saga, but I'm not going to bother. This is a 10.
Really? You're going 10
I'm
already?
going 10.
John, I will remind you that just 2 episodes ago in Eyrbyggja Saga, we gave it, I don't know if it's 9.5, something like that. And
I gave it a 9.
We wondered to ourselves, will there be a 10 out there? And 2 episodes later, you're saying 10.
I'm not saying there's going to be many 10s out there, but I don't know how you could better this.
It's very, very good. I'm not going to lie, I thought of 10. But when I sit down and read it and think deeply about it, what I find myself wanting is more. which I guess is a good thing.
Greedy man.
But here's what I guess if I'm comparing it to other medieval literature, other medieval outlaw stories, I'm thinking here specifically of some of the Tristan narratives, Beowulf's Tristan, things like that.
Okay.
Those are very fleshed out, and the outlaw character, Tristan, for example, there has a lot of fun episodes that take a little bit more time to kind of help us appreciate the outlaw. And I think for all we've built Gisli up in this particular episode, if you go through and read the saga, I don't think you're going to see as much character development as some of the other episodes you'd find in medieval literature. And for that, I kind of dock it some points.
Okay.
It's an excellent saga, but I'm going to go with a 9 rather than a 10. Though I totally understand why you gave it a 10.
Well, it's interesting. This is the highest combined score we've given out, but there's still room at the top.
There's still room at the top.
You're a hard man to please, Andy Pfrenger. All right, that's going to do it for Gisli's saga. Next time out, we're looking at a slightly lesser known saga called Henthor's Saga. And it's got a lot of great stuff in it, but it's not one that a lot of people have necessarily come across in a sort of general survey of the sagas. So hopefully some surprises in there for us as well.
We'll leave it there. And as we conclude, I'll remind you guys to check out our website, sagathingpodcast.wordpress.com. Follow us on Twitter. Go to Saga Thing Pod and let us know you're out there. And also we have our Facebook site, which is Saga Thing Podcast. So lots and lots of social media and web presence for you. Go out there and give us some comments.
Thanks very much for listening, and bye. All right, notable witticisms. This is our chance to look at some of the saga writers' best lines. I've got a couple of... What are you doing? What the hell are you doing?
I'm preparing my Bane impression.
Jackass. All right, you just threw me off completely.
Bane has a thing on his mouth.
All right. You're definitely cut off after this beer.